Hello friends, Kim Schofield here. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today we are going to be talking about some Distress Oxide background techniques, and this will be featuring some brand new sentiment stamps from Sweet and Sassy. You can see one of those close up here. So these cards are going to be made using the products from this new stamp set that you see here. It's called What a Savior. And what's unique about this stamp set is that it has these very large sentiment stamps. These are actually words from some hymns. So there are some smaller stamps and there's also a few images, but really the highlight of the stamp set are these larger sentiment stamps. And sometimes you might think, well, what could I do with such a large stamp like this on a card? And so that's what I want to show you today. So we're going to be using Distress Oxide inks, and I have a non-stick craft sheet. And then I have this trifold card here that is just cut from some watercolor paper. And I can, this is just a standard card size, and I just scored it, evenly to create the folds there. And so I am putting down a piece of painter's tape, and that's so the back part of my card, because it's all attached, doesn't get, I don't get any ink on that. So I am using some craft block. These are just blocks that you use, acrylic blocks you use for your acrylic stamps. And I'm putting some Distress Oxide ink onto the block, and then I'm wetting it with some water. And so one of the reasons that I'm doing that is so that I can control where the ink is going, and also I don't mess up the rest of my paper. So traditionally, a lot of times you put the distress inks down onto the craft mat, wet the inks on the craft mat, and then you would, turn your card over and put your paper down in the ink. But it'd be really challenging to do that with this long piece of trifold paper that I have. And so this is just showing you another way to get that ink onto your paper. So I'm going to clean up the two colors that I've used there, kind of a yellow, I think it's wild honey, and probably, I can't think of the orange one off the top of my head right now, maybe spiced marmalade, and adding some of that. So I put that one layer down and cleaned all that up, and now that I'm going and adding another layer here of the blue and the green color, peeled paint, I think, of broken china. So one of the things you need to watch for when you're putting the ink on this way is that the watercolor paper is going to immediately grab that pigment, and it's going to soak right into the paper. So it's not going to move around as much as if you were taking that paper and putting it down into the wet ink on your craft mat. You're not going to get as much movement. Of course, one of the joys of distress ink is that it reacts with water, even if it's completely dry. And so one of my best tips I have for working with distress inks is to just keep playing. I mean, keep adding clean water, keep adding. You can see here, I just have a little bit of barely any ink left on that block, and I'm just adding some clear water to it. And all that's going to do is pick up a little bit of the pigment that's still there. And that water then will react with the ink, and I'll even get you get some more little watermarks within that ink color that's already dry. And so the best thing to do is just keep applying water, applying ink, however really in a design or a pattern that is the most pleasing to you. One of the things I like about the oxide inks is that you can layer light colors over dark. And while it's not going to be as vibrant as it would be, without the dark ink, it still does show up. So you can see here, I've got that purple down, and now I want to add a little bit more of the orange. So it still mixes in. You can see that mixes in, but you also can see where it's covered up some of that purple right in the middle of the card. It was a little too much there. And I've gotten more of that orange to kind of shine through. So it doesn't completely make that purple go away. It just covers it up a little bit. And, you know, I was not real happy with this at this point. I was like, it's not looking that great. Don't love it. Too much color going on, which is what I have a tendency to do. I just can't stop myself. But by the time I stopped and I was playing with this, it ended up being completely fine. And I really liked the design by the time I finished. So it really is a matter of continuing to play, continuing to add those layers of color. Adding that clean, clear water is also a really good way to get that color moving. And you don't ever really get mud with the oxides. That's why I love them. You might get a little bit of a, you know, a deeper yellow. It might gravitate a little towards a brown, but you don't get muddied colors. I mean, I've got every color of the rainbow going on here, and it's still, you can still see the distinctness of each of the colors. So here it is completely dry. I played a little bit more. So here's the finished piece on this first card. And now I'm just, what I'm going to demonstrate to you is two more ways to add Distress Oxide inks onto your card front or your card base or watercolor paper, whatever you're using. So this is actually the plastic or the acetate that came on the back of the stamp set. So, you know, you have your stamp set and it's got that little clear plastic sheeting on there. That's all that is. So I'm putting some color down and now I can really move that around. So this is you're gonna get a lot more water here. You can see how much more water I have. And it's also going to pool more. So this creates a little bit of a softer look. I don't find when you're doing this that you get that same splotchiness to it. It definitely, you get more of a solid color across it. You can do this also with watercolors or watercolor markers, anything, any kind of ink that will react with the water. You can use the plastic packaging or sheeting for to apply color. And that gives you a really nice, soft watercolor look. And I think I was using, I forget that light color, pistachio maybe. And again, coming in with a little bit of a yellow. So I was trying to keep this one not quite as crazy as the first one. And you can see that you can just pull that plastic sheet around across your card and that will pull your color. And then of course, because it's distress ink, anywhere you've got this pooling of color, once it's dry, it'll create those nice textures. And so I'm just drying in between my layers. And if you get any little puddles of water that has taken a while to dry, you can just sop that up with a paper towel. And then now I can go in with these little bits of color and ink that I have left on that plastic sheeting, put that on there, and then you'll get that nice little, you know, I call them splotty dotties, but the little dots of color that you get when you pick up those little drops of ink. Now here I go with my purple again. I'm a little obsessed with the purple. I love it. And so because you're getting this really this pooling effect, I can even come in with my finger and kind of move that around. So now you can see here where that color, you know, it's not as vibrant purple as it was, but it's not super muddy. So when it dries, it really just ends up looking like a darker purple versus like a deep brown like you would normally get if you would mix yellow and purple together. So I just love that about the oxide inks. They are so much fun. So I really like that. It dried back nicely. This is the lilac color, so it's actually a pretty soft purple. And I really liked the depth that I got there of that color when it mixed with the yellow. And then just drying in between my layers of ink that I put down. And so here's that finished page or finished card, and I did end up adding a bit of orange there to cover that up. And so now here is my last, this is going to be so easy. You're going to love this. This is super easy. All I am doing here is, I mean, you can't get any easier than this. Just swiping some of the color across my card and then wetting the daylights out of it. So I'm adding a lot of ink, but really, or a lot of water, sorry. And I'm just using my finger to kind of get that moving a little bit, but that's all I'm really doing. And then I'll use my heat gun to move that color around and blend it in together until it is completely dry. And this, I get some really beautiful color saturation. This is really vibrant. I think this is probably my favorite of the three techniques, and certainly the easiest. You could, just those two colors alone would be gorgeous if you did that over the whole background of a card. So, but I wanted a little bit of a rainbow effect. So I'm adding my colors here, and you could use just three colors and get a rainbow. You could do a yellow and a red, and those would mix together in a blue, and you would get some nice blending, to create green. And I'm not remembering all my color mixing here, but you get the idea. You don't have to use all the colors like this, but I kept kind of my like colors together. So I've got my yellow and my green together and my blue and my purple. And I don't mind if one is blending up into the other. That just makes it even more fabulous looking, in my opinion. I mean, it just looks so cool. And then I wanted to add, I lost a little bit of that green, so I wanted to bring a little bit of that in. And you can see all I'm doing with my finger is just scrubbing so that I get rid of that line where I had that going straight across. So that's all I'm doing there. And then drawing that again, and you can see that brightens up the green a little bit there, so it didn't look all yellow. Oh man, I've got to do this in an art journal page because I absolutely loved the way this background came out. I almost didn't want to do anything to it. I ended up creating, what do you call it, like cut out windows for each of these three cards. And this one was a little tough to cut the window out of the middle. I was like, yeah, I kind of want to just leave that rainbow look right like it is. I really liked it. So I'll have to try this again and do this on a scrapbook page. I think would look pretty cool. So again, just drawing the water there, letting all of that just bleed in. So I don't want that, I wouldn't want that orange going up too far, right? But a little bit overlapping there on the yellow just looks awesome. I love it. And then of course you can add clean, clear water and let that sit on the page for just, a few seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. And once you blot that up with a towel, you'll see the way you get those little splotty dotties that react with the water. And that just adds some more visual interest and texture onto your background. If you like that kind of thing. If you don't, then don't use any clean, clear water and you'll be fine. So again, I kind of, let it sit there long enough for me to wipe up the water and then pick that up. So now I just have some Nina Solar White cardstock. I'm using some VersaFine black ink, and I am just going to stamp all three of my sentiments onto white cardstock using the MISTI just in case I need to restamp because that is a lot of area to cover. So now here's all three of my cards, and I have the cutout on all three of the fronts of them. So kind of this little peekaboo window. And I've added a frame to each of them. And so when you open it up, you see the sentiment. And then when you open the third flap, you will, have an area to write your message. So here's what I did to create the frame. So these are just some nesting dies from Spellbinders. These are super old. So I used one to cut out the hole in my card there. And then I took so here's the round die that I used to cut the hole out, cut that circle. So I'm using that same size, and then I'm taking a scalloped die cut that is not the size you would use, if I wanted to create just little scallops behind a circle die cut, I would use this size you see right here. So I'm going one size up from what you would typically use as a coordinating die to go behind your circle. And when I die cut both of those pieces, I'm just going to use I kind of eyeball where that circle should go, use some washi tape to hold that down, and run that through my die cutting machine. And there you go. You get a little frame, which is kind of fun. And that will fit perfectly around the opening there on my card. And you see I did just an oval on this one, and I did a square on my rainbow one. And then I wanted to show you, I did stamp this rose image that comes with the stamp set. And I actually am using my Distress inks to color these as well. Super quick and easy. So all I'm doing is putting some of that ink down on my craft sheet and then picking it up with a water brush. And, I put on one layer of the yellow color, and then I'm using the Spice Marmalade or the wild, I think it might be Wild Honey, to pick up and put in some shadows and some shading and a little bit darker color on the flower there. So I did a stamp where you can see those flowers. I stamped a bunch of them. I actually only ended up using 2 of them. And I just fussy cut these after they were finished being painted and everything was dry. So I did all of the coloring on those with the Distress Oxide inks, and they work awesome for that, for watercoloring, just as well as the regular Distress inks do. And so now that I have that cut out, I'm just going to use some foam tape and attach that to the outside of my frame. So I wanted to add some Nouveau drops. This is a gold, and I'm just using some sequins there for placement. I have like such a hard time deciding where do sequins go and where do these Nouveau drops go. I'm a hot mess when it comes to that. I think, is this too many? Too few? Should I add more? I never know what to do. But I think I was okay with the amount of these. You know, should they be big dots, small dots, medium dots? If I feel like some people do this with ease and it looks fabulous, and I stress out about it every time I use them. But I do love them and like the final look. I did also use some Wendy Vecchi matte minis. These are just a heavy chipboard, and you can color these again with my oxide inks, just using a blending tool and patting some color on there. And these are just some fun little embellishments. I did a bunch of these. You can see 3 of them I did here. I decided I did not want the flower on this one because it was just too large and it would cover up too much of the sentiment. So I used my purple ink on this, and this is a typewriter text background. And I'm just going to ink this up with a little bit of black ink, and this will add a little bit of design onto my butterflies. So just turn those over, very gently press those down into the stamp, and voila, I have nice little inked butterflies with a little bit of interest there. And then I'm just using a Pitt pen to color in the bodies just so it has a little bit of definition there. So I used the purple ones on my rainbow card, and then the orange ones that I had colored, I used on one of my other cards. And so that is just about finishes up the video for today. Head on over to my blog for more detailed photos and to the Sweet and Sassy blog. Both addresses are listed here on my last slide, and all of the products that you used in the video are in the description below. Happy crafting!